All right. Well, welcome everyone in to our mid-alpha stream. This is very exciting. We haven't done one of these before. It's super cool to see you all in here. A lot of familiar names who have been playing the game, and some new ones as well, which is super exciting to see. So today we're going to be going over a lot of stuff. I think one fun thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the BitCraft Alpha 2 as it's been so far. So we'll talk about some of the stuff that people have built, what people have had a good time with, what people have struggled with, things that are broken that we're going to fix, things that we want to improve, things that we want to balance, all of that stuff. That'll be fun. And then we're also going to have a demo where we show some of the tech behind BitCraft SpaceTime DB. In particular,
sorry to interrupt you, Tyler. Your Discord sounds are coming through the stream. Can you just go on Do Not Disturb on Discord? You can just change your Discord status to Do Not Disturb. I think we'll spare everyone the pain.
Discord. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. So we'll do that. Then we're going to do a tech demo. The fun thing we're going to do here is we're going to demo actually changing the BitCraft logic on the server without disconnecting anyone. So we're going to fix a bug live for you without anyone disconnecting and continuing as normal, which is an insane thing to do if you have any idea sort of how game servers work. And that's why they're going down for maintenance. Well, we don't need to, so that's kind of fun. Well, we don't always need to, I should say. But it should be pretty fun. And then after that, we're going to be talking about Alpha 3 and where we're going to be going in the future. So that should be a good time. I guess to get started, Carter, anything you wanted to talk about for Alpha 2 to get started?
I don't know. I mean, I think we'll get into it as we get a little bit further in the stream, but I think so far, like Alpha 2 has been really awesome to see. I think seeing how people have big flagship edition of Alpha 2 has been the Empire system, and seeing how many empires were created and how much people were jumping into those has been really awesome to see. I think people definitely like stress tested a little bit of what empires were able to do and helped us figure out some ways that we can polish some stuff or fix some stuff for the future. But I think also it's just the beginning of empires. So I think seeing this as like a very, very first iteration and starting to generate all these awesome ideas from us internally and from the community, hearing feedback from you guys about what we can do with empires in the future has been really exciting. And I think especially seeing all the ideas from the community of things that they want to see added to or improved or fixed, and seeing how much of this aligns with basically the stuff we've been in some capacity working on since Alpha 1 in preparation for Alpha 3. Seeing that, all the stuff we're working on is really aligning with a lot of the things that the community most wants to see addressed or added to in the future definitely has like been motivating for the team to just have, knowing that the stuff we're working on is a lot of what you guys really want. And so making us really excited about when we're going to be able to deliver that and talk more about it today as well.
Just to add to the Empire stuff, I think that, as Carter said, the Empire stuff is very much in its first version. The other thing to understand is it's a skin, and a skin is only as fun and interesting as it is cool. So there's a lot of fun stuff we have planned down the road for Empires, which I think you guys will enjoy. But it's going to look cooler and cooler as time goes on, and I think that's a really exciting thing for me. I think it'd be cool to put up banners for your Empire, let's say, in the world. That might be a fun thing to do. Improving some of the stuff that how it shows up on the map. There's a lot of cool things that we have planned there, which I think will be fun. Also, just increasing the amount that players can interact with that gameplay, even if they're not the one that's actually the Empire for the thing. Hello there, Mr. 96 Mining. Kaizuto, always very, very, very deep into the game. Wow, at 97, that's pretty insane. We can also spend a little bit of time just going through some questions here as they come up. So we've got Founder Supporter here. I'm personally more comfortable using WSD to move rather than for tilting and panning the camera. Are there any plans to make the controls customizable? I guess, Carter, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the thing that I'll start off by saying is that from the get-go, BitCraft is kind of designed and very much technically implemented in a way that makes it a click-to-move game. And so there's some assumptions there that make that kind of core to the default experience, as far as like the fact that you can't like there isn't really a third dimension. It's like a 2.5D game. That said, we've definitely heard a lot of feedback, and it's something that all the way back in like pre-alpha, I don't know, 8 or 9, like we're talking 1 or 2 years ago, we experimented with a WSD mode in the game. We found from internal tests and from I think maybe one alpha test, pre-alpha test, that it was better. It was, some people liked it at the start, and then most people basically gravitated towards click to move to continue playing. It was just like a better long-term way to play the game. That said, the main reason we took it out was just because of maintaining support for it was kind of complicated when we were trying to develop a bunch of alpha features. And so we took it out. But I think right now I would say the plan is to bring back a like opt-in WSD mode that is essentially applying WSD controls to the current click to move version of the game. I think the main reason we're a little bit cautious of this is just the fact that we don't want to set players' expectations wrongly, that this is like a full like 3D action adventure game where you can like move around in 3D and climb stuff and jump off of cliffs and all that, because it's not all those things will be possible because of the nature of like the physics of the game. But we think for the people who really like WASD, having a way to like pipe those controls into the current game is an accessibility thing at the very least we want to do. And it's something that, you know, kind of as we look at other control support schemes down the road, you know, it's being able to eventually support controllers or console or something like that. We want to be able to have different ways to drive inputs to controls in the game.
So to sum up the answer to the question, are there any plans to make controls customizable? The answer in a word is yes. It's something that we have been thinking about deeply.
Definitely.
So we've also got some gameplay here up where we're just going to be kind of playing around in the background while we chat. Let's see.
All right. So everyone, we just got word from the producer behind the scenes. We're going to have to quickly restart the stream. It should only be down for like 5 seconds. So we're going to quickly restart the stream. Everyone just be ready.
And we're back.
All right. I think we should be back.
Hello, everyone. F5 stream is live. So let's get back to some of the questions. So we've got another question from Neomore here, which is sort of a relevant question. What are your thoughts on hunting? Any chance we can cut up the animals in the field?
Yeah, great question. So the reason, basically, we're kind of constantly trying to refine how exactly the professions work, and how basically there's 2 aspects to all the professions. Essentially, there's the goods that you produce and there's the XP that you gain. And thinking about each profession and what is the game loop as far as where are the points where you gain XP, where are the points where you gain kind of items that are useful for the in-game progression and economy, and then what are the kind of challenges associated with each of these things. I think the direction that we are kind of generally moving right now is that as a part of kind of some of the more macro like economy things that we're trying to do is making it so that more things are gathered as cargo, and then needing to bring that cargo back to a base to process it creates kind of the better incentives for like setting up these distributed towns, having power progression associated with your vehicles and your storage. And so I think it's most likely that like the primary way of processing the animals is going to be bringing them back to town. But what we really want to make sure is that we're properly balancing that so that the amount of yield you get from the animals is reasonable based on how much the additional work of bringing them back. I think probably right now it's not where it should be, just from playing it and seeing, you know, the feedback from the community. I think the other aspect of that too is like, it's possible that we allow like a field stripping way of processing the animals that is, you're making some trade-off there as far as like by not bringing it back to base, you're getting a lesser yield, or you're not getting any hides maybe, or something like that, where you could opt to do this, but the game is still incentivizing you and rewarding you for doing the additional steps of bringing these back to town and making that actually worthwhile.
I think you're saying, is that correct, that you're basically saying right now it sort of is not balanced, so people might as well just sort of kill the animals for the hunting experience and they don't care about the result? And
I think most of the XP comes from processing the animals. So I think you're definitely
well, I understand,
yourself.
But my question that I'm asking, I suppose, is are we feeling that most of the XP is not worth getting because it comes with too high a barrier to get it back to the town? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I think it depends on the profession, right? And depends on the
I'm talking about hunting in this case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question there is really I think there's a fundamental assumption here that basically people are trying to go all over the world to hunt, and what they're trying to do is bring the hunted stuff back to their town, which can only be at one place in the world, as opposed to bringing it to the nearest town, which is, I think, what we would like to do, and that's kind of the direction we're headed. And so I think as we improve that, it'll be hopefully more clear how this needs to be balanced. If that's like too easy or not easy enough, or if there needs to be more yield, or if the vehicles need more storage, or the vehicles need to be more accessible. But the general pattern of yeah, go ahead.
I think it sounds like the problem you're trying to solve in this balance equation is to make it so that it's more beneficial for you to move the stuff than the cost required to, like, basically that the XP you gain from bringing it back is higher than the cost to bring it back as well.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Right.
And that should be the case. And that can either be by increasing the XP you get when you get it back. That's still super frustrating and maybe not a great game design. Or by increasing the ways you can get it back to civilization, at least, not necessarily your own town.
For sure. Yeah, I think the biggest problem right now that's hurting the pattern is the fact that people are trying to bring it back to their town as opposed to the closest town. And especially in some cases, even if it was to the closest town, there isn't close by towns. And so with some of the changes that I think we have lined up for the next alpha, it's going to be the case that there is more incentive for people to build towns across the world. It is totally possible to bring your gathered cargo to any nearby town to process it, and that should dramatically change the burden of the logistics from gathering. And I think what we want to do is keep in this direction of like gathering cargo and then processing it, but we want to be there's reasons behind that, and then what we want to be doing,
reduce the cost of bringing it
exactly. Yeah, the high cost of bringing it back to your town, which potentially is across the world, is not the cost that we're trying to ask of people for that.
So it sort of raises another point, I suppose, which is that something we've really been trying to get to work, which is very tricky for us to get to work, is trade in the game. And that's for a combination of reasons. One thing that's especially difficult about building a game like this is it's not like World of Warcraft, which itself is already a hard game to build, because in our game, it changes over time, right? The world is changing over time, and so it's very hard to balance. You need to not only balance for any particular snapshot point in time for the game, but then also the whole arc of time from the beginning of when players play all the way through to when they're very high level. And it's tricky to do that with trade. Can you talk a little bit about the things that haven't really worked with trade, or the friction that people have experienced in Alpha 2, and the kinds of things that we're looking to do to alleviate them?
Yeah, great question. I think when we see the issues with the economy, we really see it split into like two halves, and both of these things need to be sufficiently improved or at a sufficient level for any trade to happen. If one of them is below this threshold, just everything kind of falls apart. And the first thing is basically the motivation to trade. And so this is a very like important aspect, which I think I'll save for now, and we'll come back to that one. But basically, if people have a high motivation to trade, that's essential. If you don't have the motivation, even if trading is really easy, if there's no motivation to trade, you're not going to trade. The second thing is basically the ease or lack of friction in trading. And so if you have high motivation, but trading is just too difficult to do, not only will you not trade, but you're going to be feeling the pain of being motivated to trade and not being able to. And so I think that's probably closest to the situation that we have right now in Alpha 2, where there are the essential kind of aspects of motivation, maybe not exactly how we'd like them or exactly at the level we'd want, but there is some aspect of that. And then we're just really lacking on this ease of trade or having too high of friction, which is not only making trade not happen as much as it should, but it's also making the pain of not being able to trade even worse, because there's a demand to trade and you can't do it easily. We've actually been, we've listened to a lot of the community feedback, and we've been kind of working on some of these improvements, some of them even from Alpha 1. I think like obviously Alpha 2 was really focused on empires, and there was some stuff that we started work on immediately after Alpha 1 that just wasn't possible to ship when Alpha 2 was kind of ready on the empires front. And so by nature of that, it's kind of just coming in Alpha 3. But the biggest thing I would say here, which I'm curious what the people in chat think of as far as what is the biggest pain point of the friction of trade, we identify as basically the visibility. So I think the biggest problem right now is you have no concept of what's for sale where, what something's price is. Just if you are lacking this information, you, even if the trade is right next to you in the chunk, territory square next to you, there's another town that's buying everything you have and selling you everything you need. If you don't know that that's there, you're never going to trade with them, right? Even if you want it, even if they have exactly what you want, like if the game just told you that the other person was there and they want to trade with you, you would do the trade. Without that information, you're just in a deadlock, basically. And so I think that's the absolute like biggest thing we're focusing on, but not the only.
I think you've hit a very important one. And the fascinating thing about this and a lot of the other friction in trade is it's has sort of a non-linear relationship with the density of players as well. So consider a normal MMORPG. Let's say something like RuneScape, where you have maybe, what is it, like 50 different worlds that you can join, but there's one trading world and everybody goes to the same trading place in that world, or used to. Now it's the Grand Exchange, but let's go back to that world. And you can get such a high amount of density that you don't actually need the visibility, because you can assume that whatever it is that you want, somebody there will have it, because there's enough people that you know, okay, if I go to World 1, I think it was World 4 back when I was a kid, Varrock West Bank, that somebody's going to have the thing that I want, or that's the place to get it. And in BitCraft, the problem that we have is many things about trade are exacerbated by the fact that we can only fit so many people into a particular region. So let's say, for example, we decide there was some people, all the players decided that one town in the world was going to be the Varrock West Bank. Well, it's not the same distance for everybody to get there. So all the towns that are further away are going to have a much harder time going back and forth to the trading town. And there's a lot of ways that you can, there's two essential ways that you can affect density. One is either you can get more players into the same physical location. So that is to say, more trees, more resources in the same physical space, more players stacked on top of each other in towns. So like many more players per town. The other way you can do it is by decreasing the cost of trade, at least between towns. So you might do something like faster travel between towns. You might do something like roads give you a speed boost when you cross them. So now we're sort of shrinking the world. You can imagine even fast travel, or in its ultimate final super aggressive form, sort of a grand exchange. I happen to not think that that's very healthy for trade overall, but there's a spectrum to increase density, and that's a really important part of this. So that you might be able to get a town that even if they don't have something that makes their stuff visible, you know there's enough people there and they're selling enough stuff that they're going to have what you want and you can go there. Sort of an interesting perspective on it. And so I think what we need to do is balance feature changes with density changes to make sure that players can get the stuff that they want for trading. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Carter.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that the basically what you said, density, was actually the next thing I was going to list off. So basically the first biggest pain point of trade right now that we're working to address is visibility. I think we've got a really cool feature / set of changes that's going to make a massive dent in that problem. It's not going to fix everything in the first pass of it, but I think it is going to remove like 80 or 90% of the pain right now, and the vast majority of the information that players are looking for to be able to consciously like decide to make a trade and know where that is, what the price is, and be able to make informed decisions around trade, deciding if they want to make the trip somewhere to sell an item that they have that they know is being bought. I think we should be able to solve the vast majority of those problems. The second biggest thing after visibility is that density thing that you mentioned. And so there's actually a few different things beyond just trade that are going into the thoughts around density. But I would say by and large, I would say the biggest change on that front that's coming from Alpha 2 to Alpha 3 is that we are aiming to dramatically increase the player density. This is good for a variety of reasons, but especially for trade. And I think this also is fixing some of the other core issues with progression. relating to player density and some of the issues that we have around that. I guess just to comment on one of the things that Tyler mentioned about the faster roads. I know this has been a highly suggested feature in the community. This is actually something we had back in pre-alpha, and at some point during a technical migration, we had to remove it because of a technical problem. It's something we wholeheartedly plan to re-add to the game as soon as we can just have engineers sit down and work through the technical problem that we had to just fix it permanently so that we can re-add that to the game. So definitely that is coming. I can't promise that we'll have the chance to do that for Alpha 3, but it definitely is something that will come back to BitCraft. I see another comment here in chat for bridges as well as potential other fast travel. Bridges is definitely something that we've already been like concepting and figuring out. I think there's some artistic and design implementation kind of questions that still need to be answered before we add those to the game, but definitely something that we are looking to add. Coming back to kind of the density thing, I think I guess to zoom all the way out and not just look at the trade aspect of this, the biggest thing that we've realized right now is that if you think back to an old blog post that we wrote about like the scales of BitCraft, the 3 scales, the character scale, the settlement scale, and the empire scale, the whole intent is that these scales are happening separately and they interact with each other. I think the problem that we've kind of ended up with right now in BitCraft for the last few playtests is that the character scale and the settlement scale are too intertwined with each other. And I think what this creates is an effect that we don't want to have, because it goes against a lot of the assumptions that other systems are built on top of, is that every character or every small group of characters that trust each other basically need their own settlement. What this creates is regardless of the overall average density, the micro density is that many players are grouped in small settlements, and we're having like one or multiple settlements per kind of square on the map that you're uncovering. And so what this means is that the actual amount of players that you have access to trade with, even if you have that visibility, is going to be more distributed on a micro scale. And so by creating a world where there's basically fewer towns that more players are aggregating in, is both fixing a lot of problems with the progression, as far as driving better clarity between like what is the character scale progression and what is the settlement scale progression, and how do these obviously interact with each other, but they're separate. And if you are a character that doesn't want to run a settlement and doesn't want to be a trusted member of a settlement, you can fully play the character scale of the game without needing to build your own settlement. And thinking about how this changes what the requirements of your character are, you're no longer required to farm supplies to maintain your claim. You're no longer required to massively farm materials to build all the buildings and upgrade your claim. Instead, what you're focusing on is how to improve your character. And we really want that to be like a clearer scale and with clearer goals of the game. And I think the other thing that this is going to do is the kind of currently perceived like larger burdens of building and upgrading these settlements is going to land on fewer settlements with lots of players there contributing to these. And so I think that's also going to, there's a reason why some of the changes we're making are in this direction. It's because this is kind of the goal that we're aiming towards, of having more players in smaller areas. I think a big part of this is also balancing the resources. And it's also a big part of what makes a MMO feel more social, right? I think right now a lot of people are playing BitCraft as if they're basically playing, you know, a typical survival game like Valheim in a shared world. It's so if you can imagine like jumping into a public Minecraft world and just trying to like play Minecraft as if you're playing solo, in a lot of ways it's kind of just, in some ways it's maybe a more social or interesting experience, especially if there's competition or cooperation between players. But in a lot of ways it's kind of just other players stepping on your toes or having to deal with design concessions to allow all the players to live in that shared world. And really what we're trying to do here is actually to make an MMO, not just to make a shared world survival game. And so I think what we're really taking some big steps on from Alpha 2 to Alpha 3 is trying to lean into that MMO side of things a little bit more and make that make it feel like we're bringing players more together. There's more incentive and ease of actually collaborating with the other players. But I think the thing that I see feedback a lot of times in the community is like, I just want to play BitCraft solo. And I think the last thing I would just say to address that is BitCraft is designed to be a game that you can play socially solo. And so we want to make sure there's systems in the game that allow you to basically play your character without like super strongly needing to socially interact with other players. However, that doesn't mean you're not interacting with those players. You'll be interacting with them indirectly as far as how you're kind of both contributing to maybe the same town. Maybe you're creating jobs on a job board for other players to pick up. And there's still indirect interaction happening between players. That's kind of core to the philosophy and the design. But we're not going to force you to like have to like get in chat and start asking to join someone's claim or asking to join someone's guild just to be able to progress your character. That's definitely something we want to maintain.
So, I mean, here's a question, for example. So this idea is concerning me because even though at MMOs like WoW, there's a reason 5-person guilds exist, many want the small family-style guild, but guilds are a lot less mandatory. In BitCraft, this game, a guild is mandatory. So that's exactly what Carter's trying to address, actually. It's to allow you to be able to benefit from a guild that exists without having to join it. So that your 5-person guild can exist, and it is enabled by a larger one, or you can exist without a claim at all.
Yes.
And maybe your guild is just an association of friends, but you don't have the burden of actually building up a town yourself if you don't want to. And that requires adding more to the character scale of the game and having you be less tied down to a particular claim, essentially.
Yes, that's interesting. It's exactly right. The one thing I would just add to that is you could think of it as like players are playing characters. Those characters can group up to form guilds or groups or parties or whatever you want to call these, like groups of trusted players that are working together in a trustful way. But then the idea is right now, each of these groups, whether it's 1 person or 5 people or 20 people, these are each forming their own settlement. And that settlement is isolated to that trusted group. And this is what really stonewalls a lot of trade and interactions between groups. What we really want to do is say, each of these groups of players can still play in a collaborative, trustful way, but let's get many of these groups all in the same settlement and create the right incentives for that, and give those groups goals that are not just advancing their settlement, but actually powering up their characters, and create a symbiotic relationship between these towns that are trying to attract as many groups as possible to provide value to them. And all these players are then providing value to the town, both directly and indirectly by just being all in the same place. It's going to grease the wheels on trade. It's going to make the game feel more social. It's going to alleviate these burdens of maintaining a settlement for a small group or even a solo player as well.
So the Pie Face asked a good question with respect to this. I like all this in theory, but what is the actual plan here for character scale to actually matter outside of the settlement scale? Maybe something we can talk about a little bit.
It's a great question. I think what we're really, the main kind of thing we're looking at here is just what are the ways that you are advancing your character? Like, what are the long-term goals of focusing exclusively on the character scale? And so we're doing some internal playtests right now on the BitCraft development team, where we're basically looking at this as like, what if you basically didn't interact at all with the settlement scale and the empire scale? What is your player journey? What are your goals? What is your game loop? And I would say the main thing we're looking at here is basically you have this game loop of like gather, craft, power up. And actually probably like explore, gather, craft, power up. And that kind of encompasses a wider set of things. But essentially, it's going out into the world, exploring the world, gathering things, whether it's a gathering profession or whether it's doing an ancient ruin, whether it's going into some challenge or finding a traveler or doing whatever type of stuff, exploring and kind of gaining stuff from the world, coming back to a safe part of kind of civilization and processing it, crafting it, refining it, whatever you're doing with these things that you found. And that's both accumulating experience on your character, which is making your character more competent to be able to do new things in the game world. And then using these things that you've gathered or processed to either trade for or directly acquire upgrades and power-ups to your character. And so these are going to take a few different dimensions that are in the game right now, but we want to expand these dimensions in the future. So some of these things would be like more powerful or more useful deployables. So like your personal cache, your market stand, but also vehicles. So like better carts, better boats, more variety of these. We're going to add mounts to the game or re-add mounts to the game. So basically getting these different forms of transportation and logistic power-ups is going to be really powerful. Improving the character scale power of like storage as well is going to be a power-up. Then we also get to your actual character stats. And so this is going to be stuff like This is going to be stuff like your equipment. I think I don't want to promise anything yet, but we're making some big changes. I think the power sources and how those like permanently upgrade your character has been something that hasn't gotten any love in probably like 6 or 8 months, or maybe even a year since we were in pre-alpha. This is something that we've been planning to come back and do a big pass on. And so the equipment that your character can acquire, craft, and how it can improve your character is something that we're going to add a lot of breadth to and depth as far as the amount of content in there. And how you acquire these is hopefully going to be a lot more interesting now that we don't have to have all this burden on the character from building up their settlement. We can make acquiring these equipment power-ups a lot more interesting and something players need to work towards. These are going to basically power up your stats of your character. Go ahead.
One thing I'll just add in here, which is kind of interesting as well, is right now the world is quite tame insofar as you as a character can go anywhere and do anything that you want. You're not really limited. There's no progression for your character in exploration. And I think one thing we can definitely add to the world is add areas which are dangerous and something where you have to actually work up to being able to go and explore those places, or get the necessary skills to explore a dungeon that you might not have been able to before, or fight a monster that's blocking a region that you really want to be able to get to find the stuff that's in there. And that's going to involve building up your character to be able to actually go do that stuff. And I think that's interesting. And it also will make the towns a fun, sort of cozy place that you can go back to rest and recuperate before you go on your next adventure, which makes it more about the exploration and the adventuring than it is right now, which is really about sort of your town and upgrading that.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of that, of getting those players in that same area and having these towns be these like safe havens for players to amass, we've created a world that has some like exploration challenges right now, whether it's the heights of the world of like some biomes being difficult to navigate and all this, and we've created a mechanism for players to modify that and basically kind of like civilize these like harsh terrains. But players are way too spread out and lacking kind of motivation to like share a same small space, that the actual process needed to like complete these world scale projects of like modifying the world are not really being undertaken, or they're being undertaken only by the largest trustful groups. What we want to say is like, hey, if there's no like super harm or too much competition by having a lot of players in the same place, in fact, there's benefits of it. Now, actually building that road or carving that ramp up the mountain is going to be like a shared project that a lot of players can get behind, that are in the same space, that, you know, everyone can agree, hey, this benefits all of us. Let's make this project. As opposed to players being like, hey, we don't want to make this thing because other people are going to encroach on our space, or we don't have enough people in our trusted group to do a larger project like this, or it's going to take too much time. What we really want to, I think what we'll see as we make these more dense hubs of players and we remove some of the kind of current adversarial nature of having too many players too close, we're hopefully going to see more of these projects being undertaken.
Yeah. Just going to slide in here. We got a lot of questions in chat here about all the details of this.
Cool.
So, for example, we're going to have to move through them quickly because we're getting more.
Yeah, let's speed run a few.
So let's start with this. Will claims with higher tiers in Empire capitals be able to move while maintaining their Empire and higher tier claim? Basically, is it something we want to allow people to be able to move around the world?
Can you move your capital? Is that the question?
Yeah, well, it's really, can you move your towns? Well, can you move your claim, realistically? Or is it, when you pick a spot, it's going to be where it is?
Yeah, so I think the idea that we're looking at is like, we want there to be some process of establishing a town, and we want there to be some like cross benefit of like, if you have a really advanced town and you want to set up a new outpost, that's going to be easier than building the first town, but we don't want it to be something that you can snap your fingers and instantly establish. Part of the reason for that is we want to reward a player who goes out there and starts a town in the wilderness and has that kind of like incumbent kind of setup. We don't want that to be immediately undermined by someone just swooping in. Like, we want there to be a little bit of like a first mover advantage, that if you go and like tame the wilderness in the desert and you set up that like beachhead of that like civilization town, that you reap some reward for that. And so that's part of the incentive there.
Next question. So this is all about rental systems. This was in reference to what we were talking about allowing you to interact more with the towns. Because we cannot progress unless we have access to higher tier benches and boxes that belong to other claims. It's a very good question from Bearded Fox DM. You want to...
Can you repeat it one more time? I don't know if I 100% understood that.
The question is, so this is all about the rental claim system, because we cannot progress unless we have access to higher tier benches and boxes that belong to other claims. So the concern is, clearly we must be needing to make some change allowing people to access higher tier benches and stuff, because we can't currently do that.
So I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're looking at is creating a way for players to, in a way that is beneficial to the town hosting this, basically publicly use the crafting stations in other people's towns is the main kind of, at least one of the first structural changes that's coming with this. And so what that means is that if you want to progress to tier 2 or let's say a higher tier, let's say say you're trying to get to tier 4 and you're getting to the highest level, part of what you're going to be incentivized to do if you're focused on your character is you want to find a town that has those things, or you want to figure out how you can help the town that you're in get those upgrades completed.
I think the question is though, what are we going to actually do to the game to make it so that I can interact with a town where I can't currently?
Yeah, so I mean, these changes have already been made internally, but basically the way it works is active crafting stations are now fully public. We've changed the system of how the project slots works and locking slots works to make it so that there should be virtually, I wouldn't say there's no impact from other players, but the aim here is to make it so that overall settlements are rewarded by having more and more players use their town, as opposed to feeling like these visitors are clogging up your stations. That's the primary thing. I see someone asked, a visitor role? Basically, everyone in the whole world is a visitor, if you want to think of it like that. There isn't a distinct role. It's just you walk into any town, you can walk up to any crafting station, and by default, right now, you can use it, is in the testing builds that we're doing internally. And so we've got this, there's a certain balancing aspect to this of making sure that, hey, there's maybe some motivation to build more than one of each building, but there's also not a massive burden of hey, too many players walked into my town and now I can't use my own crafting stations. So there's still mechanisms where you can build an enterable building and you can put crafting stations in there that only the members can use. So you can have essentially members only private crafting stations by just putting them inside. And that's where balancing the sizes and the costs of those interiors is also important.
I think it's fair to say that the solution is TLDR. We're opening up the towns. The towns, free the towns. # free the towns.
Yes,
in a sense, they're becoming much more open, and I think that'll be good. And also not in a way that's detrimental to the town. In fact, it's beneficial because it will attract other players. So we got another one that's sort of relevant. We got a lot of them, so we're gonna have to be rapid. But AO's gamer, not sure. The tutorial. The quote tutorial should change that many claims aren't being created by new players, and the assumption is almost that you need your own claim. Likened to Minecraft or RuneScape, you spawn into a tutorial island that still teaches you the basics but doesn't leave a semi-permanent mark in the world. What are your thoughts on that, Carter? I know you have.
Yeah. So almost exactly what you just said is something that we originally proposed or discussed on the team. I think we've come to a implementation that we're testing right now. Actually, most of the BitCraft team is right now in a play test, testing this build of the game internally, which basically achieves, I think, functionally almost the exact same thing without the phasing aspect. So I think the game design oriented people among the audience here might appreciate this, but we came to an interesting realization of how we had muddied the design philosophy of BitCraft. And what we realized is that basically the whole point of the character scale is supposed to be the scale at which you can never lose progress. It is advancing your character and powering up your character in a positive direction only. And the other aspect that is conflicting with that is that anything that goes in the world is a shared resource and needs to have some sort of maintenance aspect to it. Otherwise, the world will get polluted and destroyed over time. And so the conclusion that we realized that we had been missing in the last few cycles of design in BitCraft was that we had been trying to take buildings, which are fundamentally things that go in the world, and try to say that those are part of the character scale and those are needed to progress your character. And the thing that's wrong with this is that if a character can only progress forward and buildings are in the world and buildings must decay, these things are at odds with each other. And so what we realize is we need to clean up the separation between the settlement scale and the character scale. And what that means is the character scale is about advancing your character, and the settlement scale is about building civilization and building settlements. And so if you want to build a settlement, building the buildings is part of your progression. If you want to build your character and make your character more progressed in the game, building buildings is not something we expect you to do. It's part of the symbiotic relationship between characters and settlements, in the same way that, an empire doesn't need to have towns aligned to them to progress, but it's something that settlements and empires can have a symbiotic relationship.
So this then I suppose leads naturally to Dactyl 198's question, which is, what is the current plan for claim progression beyond simply allowing crafting of higher tier tools? Once players can utilize any claim, what's the benefit for claims to level themselves up versus just walking to the next claim over that did it for you? Like, what would be your motivation?
It's a good question. I mean, the way we see it and the way it was originally conceived is that building a settlement is not something that's going to appeal to every player in BitCraft. This is going to appeal to the people who want to really develop the world, create like a social kind of desirable town. And so we want to create ways that we want to create more than one dimension that a town can be useful. And so I think right now, all of the progression is kind of funneled into basically just what's your town's tier. And so the goal for the future, which I'm not sure how much will make it into Alpha 3, is to make it so that there's more than one dimension that a town can be useful to players. Just having a town that is close to a specific set of resources, you don't need to be the best town in the world. If you're the closest town that meets the minimum requirement that players need, that's valuable. If you're just a point of safety in a harsh area that's selling food and offering kind of comfort or a place to rest or heal up, that's also valuable. Offering different ways that claims can specialize.
What is the value? That's definitely valuable to other players, but how is it valuable to the player that created it? And I think what you're saying is that it's socially fulfilling for you to be able to build that thing. But not only that, you get to make a mark on the world in a way in which a character scale person doesn't. So you get to customize the world and change it to the way that you like it, make your cool looking town. And we think that's the fundamental motivation of BitCraft, is over other games, right? Is that you can actually change the world. Is that right? I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I would say, I think there also will be advantages of we want to make sure that there is a value in all forms of, if you create a town that provides value to players, you as the settlement owner or administrator are able to reap some benefit of that. I think the fact that you'll be able to kind of set the boundaries of trade kind of within your settlement to some extent, of being able to set up a bunch of shops that maybe have a profit margin on them in your settlement. If you're attracting a ton of players, you're going to have a kind of increased volume of trade that's happening in your town, which you'll reap more of those margins on. So whether you want to call it taxes or margins or whatever, having more players in your town that are using all your stuff, I think over time, as we build up this stuff, is going to allow you to benefit and become, whether it's becoming wealthy in game, whether it's having certain resources that you need to develop your claim and upgrade your claim faster, you're going to benefit by creating something of value for a lot of characters. In addition to just having your mark on the world, or being able to make even more of a mark on the world.
So we got some good questions from Dactyl as well here, 198. So also, have you given any thought into how a claim in a higher tier area is supposed to level up to the point where they can process the materials in that area? So for example, as it stands, there's no way for a claim to settle in the desert and process its goods for a good month after it was placed. Do we have any sort of thoughts on that?
I don't know if I agree with the timeline, because I think people have already reached tier 6 and the alpha has been live for less than a month. So presumably you could do that in less than a month. But as far as how you do that, I think what we're looking at here is when I said the multiple dimensions, the thing that I didn't quite get to yet was right now there's one dimension of unlocking more things that a claim can do, which is basically just reaching the higher tier. I know nobody's reached tier 6 yet. I see everyone saying that, but there's quite a few people who are tier 5 is my understanding. We're on the cusp of tier 6. I'm aware. The thing that we want to do is make it so that there's more than one dimension, and so upgrading your settlement to specialize in certain types of high tier stuff is something that should also be kind of part of this more than one dimension of upgrading. So it's not just hey, there's a massive cost of upgrading everything to each tier. Maybe there is a minimum cost of unlocking the tier, and then there's distributed costs of upgrading specific things. And so, having your kind of raising your cap to tier 6 should be something that's more easy to reach, but then upgrading each different aspect of material type or something up to the higher tiers. This would be an example of how we can do it. We haven't settled on exactly how we want to split this up, but suffice to say there'll be different dimensions. So a town specializing in something as far as how they unlock their research is definitely something we want to allow.
Can I just say, not to draw too much attention to it, but we've got some very interesting stuff going on here in the background, including people from many different empires, including the Emperor of Empire 5, Citizen of the Free Holds of Nintron, some really cool stuff. And it looks like we're clear cutting the forest as well. And some prayers. Oh, are they? What's going on there? I think we might have a human centipede. Okay. In any case, they appear to be part of some potentially religious group within the game. I'm not sure. We've got a new question here from Blueburst SC. As a brand new player who hasn't done any research and recently got into the alpha test, what is planned for new players who join a world that is fully developed? Are spawn points going to have variety? I'm thinking potentially years down the line. Something we've thought about a lot.
Do you want me to go on that?
Yes, please.
Cool. So I think another big change that's coming with the changes that I mentioned around this separation of the character scale and settlement scale is we really want the early game of, like, say at least the first like 2 or more hours of the game to be laser focused on the character skill. And so what this means is there's no more, hey, you just started the game and you're learning the controls and now start a claim and now make supplies and you better maintain this. What this also means is that the starting areas of the game are going to be pristine and actually preventing you from setting up any claim there. Which means that if you're a new player coming into the game for the first time, you're always going to be starting in what is effectively the wilderness. It's going to be a relatively safe area of the wilderness, but it's going to guarantee that you get basically a pretty clean experience, whether you're coming on day 1 or day 50. The only thing that might be different is what some of the other players that are around you are doing or what they have. And by and large, that should have very little impact on you. But it could change things. So for example, like if a high level player wants to set up a barter stall in a low level player area or a spawn area, they could still set up that deployable barter stall, and they could set up some trades that are maybe like offering pretty more powerful items that you wouldn't normally get in the first hour or 2 of the game that they've accrued for something that a low-level player could provide a value to them. And so these might be trades that you see later in the existence of the world than you wouldn't see on day 1. But in general, that new player experience should be like a lot more similar and a lot less polluted by other players in Alpha 3.
So Cozy Sweets brings up an interesting concern. I assume this is with respect to freeing up towns. So they say, also Cozy Sweets is a streamer. Check her out on her stream. But this doesn't promote trade though, because now you just do your work there and bring it back to your town. You're making it easier to not trade. So the concern is basically, if we open up towns, why do I need something from a town if I can just use their town to make it? Maybe you can answer a little bit about how we're preventing that from being the meta.
Yeah, so I think it depends. I think if you're fundamentally still thinking of your progression in the game as advancing your town, then the thing that I would say is that you're making an assumption for a character or a player that is fundamentally focused on the settlement scale, not the character scale, which we believe will be a minority of players. And so in that sense, like, you as a settlement focused player might be going and doing some of this stuff, but you're also going to have many character scale players who are producing these things that they don't have much use for, and you're going to be creating value for them. That is going to be the main source of you getting stuff to advance. I think if you're a character who doesn't have a settlement, what you're seeing is like, hey, I can gather this stuff here and I'm getting XP and I'm getting items, and then I can go process it in the town. But what do I need this stuff for? What I actually want is money or something else that I can get the things I want to get the power up that I want. And so what you're looking to do is offload that stuff into that town that you just process it in, if possible. Like, set up your own barter stall, or if there's a barter stall there that's already buying these items that are that localized resource, you're going to see players with a demand. The other players who have settlements on other places of the world are going to want to come here to get these items. And so rather than gathering them themselves, they're going to go to this town where all these players are coming to process this stuff, and they're going to be picking it up to take it back to their settlement. And what are you going to do? Well, you want to get back out and gather more stuff. You just want to offload this stuff, get the power-ups you want, however, whatever you're trying to get to be able to access those, whether it's liquidating your stuff for currency to other players that you can use that currency to buy the things you want, or buying special items that you need. But otherwise, you're just basically, let me get back out there. And if you're mining in the desert and there's a mining outpost, you just want to mine, come back to that town, process, sell your stuff, go back out and mine more. Your concern is not with accumulating tons and tons of ore. That's going to be someone else's concern, basically.
And to make, I suppose, a general point about trade, when does trade happen? Trade happens when somebody has something that I want but can't get, or can't easily get, or I can't get it as easily as they can, and vice versa. So if I have something that somebody else can't get. So for example, that also has to do with the leveling system and the specialization. Early on in these tests, everybody can kind of do everything. The more you get deeper into the skill levels, the harder it's going to be for you to do something that it would be easier for some other person to get. So like if there's a level 99 person and I'm more freely able to interact with the goods that they have, it's easier for me to just ask them to get the level 99 piece of wood that I need, rather than for me to go all the way up to 99 and get it. And so that's really what we want to try and set up is disparities, either because of geography, because this town, let's say, is closer to the mine, so it's easier for you to process your goods there than to bring them all the way back to your town, or use your town because it's closer to the fish than to bring the fish all the way back to their town, and sort of use the things you have. And that actually will increase trade if you can make it so that the goods are being produced in the place, in a particular place, which induces that town to be able to want to sell that to other places which can't as easily make the materials, if that makes any sense. So specialization, not only amongst players, but also amongst towns, is another thing that we want to encourage and investigate and see how we can do better. So that, like, hey, this is clearly the town I want to go to if I need this kind of a thing. And right now, what you see is you don't see any of that. You see really just every town is an island, and they do everything, and that's partially part of the design of how you upgrade towns, but it also has a lot of impact on things. Something to consider.
A few quick questions I see in chat. So someone, Nolmar said, if you're a character scale player, what's the point of playing? Serious question. I think the key thing here is, if you look at any other MMORPG, or really any single player RPG in general, I think like these are fundamentally games that are basically just character scale games. They're missing the entire settlement and empire scale that we have in BitCraft. And so what we're looking to do is nothing super novel. We're trying to emulate what a lot of classic RPG games have, which is powering up your character, having meaningful challenges that test the power of your character, having things that you can do as you get more powerful that give you
uncovering.
Yeah, and I think having also like a desirable kind of like cosmetic oriented, achievement oriented rewards as well helps with this too, of being able to show off your achievements in the game. I think especially in an MMORPG is a big part of that that progression. I think like I see someone said player skill. I think they mean character scale players will have similar gameplay loop to RuneScape, it seems. Yeah, I think that's basically on the money. I think like if you look at a fresh character in RuneScape compared to a maxed account with all the diaries and all the kind of quests completed in RuneScape, what you can do as that character and kind of how much you have access to in the game is completely different. And primarily that comes through just incremental power increases. And these aren't all stat increases. Sometimes it's letting you teleport to a location you couldn't do before. Sometimes it's access to an item that gives you a function that you couldn't do before. I think these are the types of stuff that we want to create as like progression and power progression, as well as cosmetic progression that you can have in the character scale. Basically just creating a good RPG. I saw another question that I wanted to address. Someone asked, will there be ways to link like warehouse style buildings to barter stalls to allow barter stands to require less constant attention? This is definitely something that we are linking to allow crafting or barter stalls to like link to storage buildings was something that we were looking into. It's a bit complicated from a UX standpoint and a technical standpoint. I think what we're almost certainly going to do in the shorter term is just do a balancing pass to make it so that like barter stalls have much bigger inventories. The main issue there is just competing with other buildings. Now that we have access to the deployable barter stalls, I think we can have like basically make it so permanent building barter stalls can have much larger inventories that scale better, that doesn't completely undermine the storage buildings in the game. So that we definitely want to make improvements there. Eventually, we'd like to link these to storage buildings as well. And then there's one last thing. Someone said something along the lines of, I'm trying to see if I can find it. Like, oh, why would we trade? We're degenerates. Oh yeah, here we go. I highly doubt it will increase trade. We are degenerates. We transport stuff from one end to the other. I think this is where the visibility and the visibility will change things. Is like, of course, you can go to the desert, gather a bunch of stone, and bring it all the way back to your town. But if you see that you can gather trunks right beside your town, sell them in your town, and use that money to buy ore from the town next to you for less time and effort than it's going to take to go all the way to the desert and gather it yourself, why would you do that, right? I mean, sure, you can play it. You could do that if you want to put an additional challenge or kind of more work on yourself than you need to. But if the game was showing you, if there was visibility options that you could see that there's an easier way to do it, people, I think, will gravitate towards the path of least resistance. It's kind of the whole idea of like...
Not only that, but sorry, just one interesting thing is we can also change the density of the world in it, so to use a math term, in a non-Euclidean way. What do I mean by that? What I mean is what we can do is within high-level towns or things that are, I would say, deeply part of civilization, we can make those closer together. So for example, if you have a road where if you walk on it, it goes faster, that's not making the whole world smaller. It's only making the connections between civilization smaller. So for example, if we're increasing the relative distance of that desert to another town, and the other town already has the stuff, it's better to go to the town than to the desert because it's going to be much faster than going all the way to the desert. So this is sort of interesting tricks that you can do to sort of buff trade and nerf doing it yourself. So hopefully that's just better for you because it's easier. You don't have to be quite so degenerate if you don't want to be.
Yeah, I think the other aspect too is I think there's a decent contingency of players in BitCraft that really are excited to have the main activity they do in the game be merchanting or like buying and selling and moving goods around the world. I think with the trade visibility where it is right now, which is basically non-existent, that activity is essentially dead. Like you can't really do that in any meaningful way without like coordinating through discords of what you're going to move for who and how much they're going to pay you. I think this is also getting to a point that we've talked a lot about internally recently, which we will maybe talk about more on stream, which is just the situation with the currency and like the economy of the game. That's definitely something that's getting a full like thought pass, and it's part of why we're running the experiment right now on Alpha 2. But before I dive into that, basically just to tie back to what I was saying, as we improve the visibility, there's going to be a class of character scale players that doesn't want to get level 100 in a profession. The thing that they really want to do is make money trading across the world. That's their primary activity they like doing in the game. That's fun for them. And powering up things that allow them to do that better is fun for them. And so what we want to say is, hey, let the people who want to be the level 100 foresters focus on forestry, and let the people who want to transport stuff across the world do the transporting. And if both of these are creating value in different ways and the economy is kind of a little bit better balanced than it is right now, so that the currency is stable and prices are more stable, then the people who want to move stuff can do the moving. The people who want to gather stuff can do the gathering. Both of these players can generate value for other players by doing that, and they can get compensation, hopefully, through a stable economy by doing that. And so the fact that the world is spread out means that like the players who want to do the stuff they want to do can do that, assuming the economy gets more stable.
That's definitely the idea. And I think Brisk701 here asks a related question, which is, can you really balance trade without the final world size already being in place? And this is a very interesting question. The answer to it is yes, you can, because the thing that matters is actually not world size, but world density. So, for example, imagine the world was infinite and we had the same density of players throughout the entire world. Well, clearly, if there's no fast travel, that is to say, if the density is low, a player who's physically very far away from you cannot possibly have any impact on your game because they can't travel across that distance to actually have an impact. So we can actually test the game in its complete form with a small world without actually invalidating that experiment. Notably, however, if you have a global way of moving around, so if you can teleport around, then all of a sudden, yes, the world population matters, because anyone from anywhere can access a particular place, meaning the density is sort of maximal. It's sort of anybody in the game can do that. And actually, if you think about this thought experiment, and I wanted to kind of go through this, is what would it take to make BitCraft functionally the same as the RuneScape World 1 West Varrock Trading Center? And the answer to that is it would have to be possible for any player to walk to the nearest town and teleport to that location, which is maybe not, I don't know that that's even necessarily a bad thing, but that's just to give you an idea, that would make it equivalent. Because in RuneScape, you need to be able to walk, you need to be able to change to the world that you want to go to, and then walk to Varrock. So basically, everything needs to be one RuneScape map away from the trading center at most, from a global trading center for the whole world, right? So not just the local one and the same one. And I think you might see us experiment with things like that. Like, can we make it so that there's a place which is player created, absolutely, but that is accessible to many more people than is right now, where people will start to trade. And we actually considered adding something like that to this playtest, mid-playtest, just to see how it went. I think there ended up not being enough time for that. Is that right, Carter?
Yeah, it was just a matter of, did we want to try to run this experiment at the cost of the development that's ongoing for Alpha 3 right now? And we decided that there's more important stuff that we want to make sure is ready for Alpha 3. And maybe we'll do that experiment during Alpha 3, I think is more reasonable if we are going to do that.
And how that would kind of look, just for context, is like maybe you build a town at a certain point. You can connect towns and make them faster to travel, but then at some ultimate point, you'd be able to build a trading post, which would allow you to jump to any other town that had a trading post or something like this. Maybe there'd be different directions depending on which way you go. So you can actually trade with another town by going to that town across the world, which is heretical in some sense to some of the principles, but is definitely not as far as a grand exchange, which just takes all the personality out of trading. Why are we saying just the game over screen? Rip trains. Oh, right.
I think one thing that's come up in past discussions or maybe even past streams is like, I think some people, we've said some things that maybe made people believe that like there would never be fast travel in BitCraft. I think the important, basically, what is the fundamental like logic train here? Basically, the idea is one thing that we have is like a core tenet that we want in BitCraft is we want geographical merchanting or trade to be something that is like an activity you can do in the game. So buying stuff somewhere, transporting it, selling it somewhere else, that's important. If everybody can globally trade anything, then the prices of items across the world will stabilize to be the same everywhere. And so what we want is to create surpluses in some areas and higher demand in other areas for specific items by basically having the world not be completely uniform and not having a trivial way to trade stuff globally. That doesn't mean that there can't be ways to transport your character or transport small amounts of stuff or even large amounts of stuff. What it means is that there needs to be an appropriate cost of those things. And so if you want to, I think there's other games that have aspects of fast travel and this geographic economy that work together. I think games like Albion Online or Eve, both are games that have varying aspects of like fast travel and transportation, much faster transportation. But they also have globally distributed economies and kind of price differences, while still also having kind of like central markets and areas that are like massive trade hubs. And so I think basically overall, we're aiming to implement some of the kind of proven design systems, I guess, that these other games employ to still have distributed kind of geographically distributed prices and trade happening where you can still merchant stuff from one place to another. But there's also much easier ways that you can, if you just want to transport yourself across the world to go gather something in the desert, there's a much faster way than just like boating all the way there yourself if players have built the proper stuff to civilize kind of getting to that area. And if they haven't, now that's a motivation for you to maybe, how can you contribute to getting that civilization established, right? I think players will benefit from the civilization that settlements create. And so having players be invested in settlements producing this civilization that they get to reap the rewards of will be something that they're interested in seeing happen. So creating that's part of the symbiotic relationship between the characters and settlements.
Absolutely. I think it's very exciting times. So I'm a little bit mindful of time because we're kind of approaching
so I think
time.
One thing we didn't clarify though is I think you mentioned about doing this live hotfix or
yes,
module hot swap.
That's what I was about to go into. Yeah,
cool. But I think we're actually going to be doing that not on our stream, right?
Oh no, I thought that was happening actually on the BitCraft stream, just to show the people here how the sausage is made a little bit. That was my intention.
Okay, my understanding was John was getting that ready on the SpaceTime stream.
Okay, we can do that sort of then when we switch over to SpaceTime. So that makes sense then. So we'll just do that in the next stream. So what we're going to be doing there, for those of you who don't know, SpaceTime DB is built on a server backend technology we developed called SpaceTime DB. The point of SpaceTime DB is really as a developer productivity and user experience tool. So we think that it basically allows a one-person team to be able to make an MMORPG. I am super excited to see a world where an indie dev can make an MMO, whatever MMO they want. I think it's super cool. It also lets you do insane things that even this is literally cutting edge stuff. There is no system that I know of in the entire world that lets you do what we're about to show you in the next stream, no matter what it is. So bleeding edge, all the state-of-the-art systems do not allow you to do this. So World of Warcraft, all of them, they all have to go down. Not so in SpaceTime DB and in BitCraft. And we'll be showing you that in the next SpaceTime DB stream. So before we go and do that, I guess I would like to say that also it makes managing an MMO backend server so much easier for a developer that I think one person could do it. So with that said, Carter, you want to talk a little bit about main goals for Alpha 3? What are some of the fun things we want to tease for the next Alpha? Keep in mind, people on top of the cliff there, the Alpha's not over. We're still going here for a fair amount of time. So this is a mid-Alpha stream, not the end of Alpha stream. We'll be having one of those as well.
Awesome. One thing I saw there was a bunch of questions in chat. I was just replying to a few things in the chat. So I'll quickly just address that. We're going to do another stream when the Alpha is coming to an end. And I think some of the things people were requesting of like some art teasing for Alpha 3 or some of the stuff that's coming, I will definitely talk to the team and see if we can put that together for the next stream. Yes, we are only to the midway point of Alpha 2. Yes, this is a mid Alpha 2 kind of check-in stream where we wanted to, I've seen there's a lot of feedback, a lot of suggestions from the community. And so we wanted to jump in here and answer some questions, give a little bit of a teaser of what's coming in the future. But definitely Alpha 2 is not over yet. How much longer roughly? I think around 2 weeks at least, or ballpark 2 weeks. Yeah, I think we're around like week 3 out of 5 from what was originally said. So I think there'll be an announcement posted soon about when the exact end date will be, but we want to give people some notice, but obviously we want to like not, as soon as we say the announcement, people are going to, feel like things are close to ending. So we want to keep that, keep things going for a bit more. As for Alpha,
what's going to happen?
Yeah. So for Alpha 3, I would say like one of our biggest focuses is really just around making sure that the new player experience is a lot more clean and polished than it is right now. And so there's going to be a bunch of quality of life stuff, but also just cleaning up. I think the fact that we introduce you to the character scale and the settlement scale and how other players can negatively impact your first few hours of the game. This is all stuff that we're putting a huge emphasis on. And we also want to spend kind of a smaller percentage of the focus on really like adding a lot of stuff to the very end of the game. So for the people who have been like loyal and playing through Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 all the way to the end of the content, we want to make sure that you're not playing. I think Alpha 2 was very similar to Alpha 1 in terms of the scope of the content because we were really focused on adding empires. We want to make sure that Alpha 3 brings a bunch of new content and goals for players of all scales, really. But for the people who are really reaching the end of the current content in the game. So there's a huge motivation to like play through Alpha 3 and reach some new awesome stuff. I would say from a like specific feature domain area, there's basically 4 main aspects. There is disentangling the scales. And so this is like making a cleaner separation between the character scale game loops, and the character scale rewards from the settlement scale game loop, and the settlement scale kind of progression and rewards. Next thing is adding more adversity to the game. So I think right now, BitCraft has been a game where the only kind of factor of how far you progress in the game is just how much time do you spend. And so basically, you know, you could almost train a toddler how to play BitCraft, and it's just a matter of how many times do they click, how much time passes while they're progressing in the game. You can keep advancing. What we really want to add is a little bit more skill and strategy expression in the game, so that if you're a more sophisticated player and you're coming up with more kind of clever ways to do stuff in BitCraft, you'll reap the rewards of that, and you'll be able to progress more quickly. And also that you're bringing more of a challenge to the game. And so having something as the game that are implicitly hard to do, that makes it so that like you actually need to think about how you want to approach these challenges and how you want to solve these problems, and create a little bit more stimulation as far as progressing through some of the aspects of the game. As opposed to just thinking, okay, I need to spend 30 more hours of grinding to be able to complete this challenge. It's,
Carter, yes.
Yeah.
And Carter didn't mean to call you all toddlers.
I'm saying right now they're those of you who have
trained toddlers. True.
No,
they're not nearly
trained
toddlers.
No, but what I'm saying is the people who are in here playing the game, what I want to make sure is the skill that I know you guys have, you have a way to express that in BitCraft. I think right now BitCraft doesn't give you the chance to use that skill to like feel like you're getting a reward for having that skill expression in the game. And so what we really want to say is, how can we add a way that you can actually show off the skill that you have that's above a toddler and actually get rewarded for that in the game? That's really what we're
not only that, but I think part of making a cozy town, a place where you civilization requires non-civilization in a sense to be out there, be a place you can explore, something new and interesting, something exciting, something, you know, dangerous, where there's a little bit of risk involved, if you want to take it. I don't think we would ever make BitCraft a game where you constantly need to be surviving throughout the entirety of the game. But it does, it's very hard to die in BitCraft today. And that is good in some ways. It also makes it a little bit less exciting than I think it could be. So that's something that I suppose I'll just tease out there.
Yeah. And then the last thing, I talked about this a little bit with the scales, but I think a big thing that's missing right now in the game, apparently I don't think I got kicked for being AFK. Someone said that in chat. I think the last 2 big things, I guess, is just making sure that there is more purpose and goals that players have. I think right now, the main goal that everyone really orients around is just, how do we advance our claim to the next level? And so if you are kind of basically, whether you're making your own claim or you are in kind of a trusted group of some of these like clans that have formed, that's trying to progress a single claim, really that's the main goal that everyone is really working towards. What we really want to do is break that out and say there's a huge diversity of goals. Some people's goals might be collecting a bunch of stuff. Some people's goals might be exploring the world. Some people's goals might be becoming like a super kind of powerful character that can survive any dangerous encounter, and kind of completing some challenges associated with that. Some players' goals might be reaching max level in a profession and reaping rewards associated with that. We want to make sure that there is both kind of these different goals exist, but then also there's a clear path to chase these goals. There's clear visibility on these goals. There's better status associated with accomplishing these goals, so that the average player is not just trying to, I need to upgrade my town to tier 10. The average player is thinking about, what do I want to do in BitCraft, and what are the goals that help me work towards that goal? And then the last thing is just making a whole bunch of quality of life and polish stuff. I think we've done a handful of this at the start of Alpha 2, like the alt inspect, some of the like move all back and forth from storage. There's a bunch of stuff that we went over on the kickoff stream. But I think continuing to just pile on more and more of these things that polish the game up, adding the little birds that fly away. This is like a tiny thing that we threw out during Alpha 2. There's just tons more stuff like this that we're bringing to the game to make it feel more polished, give you more abilities to do kind of different things, more emotes, more interactions, but also just overall polish and quality of life things that's just going to make playing the game feel less annoying.
So With all of that, some really, really exciting stuff coming in Alpha 3. And it'll be really interesting to see as well how the players close out Alpha 2, and how we see trade develop as players reach the higher levels and it becomes sort of more interesting. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of the currency change. From what I've heard, it's made it so that the higher level players have something to give to the lower level players, which they want because they don't have any currency. It's the only way to get it is from other players. Just a Game Over Screen says, I love the currency change, presumably because it made all of Just a Game Over Screen's coins worth a lot, or worth something at least to new players. So I'm really glad that had the intended effect that it had. It'll be really interesting to see how this develops over the next few weeks for Alpha 2. And then it's going to be on to Alpha 3 with some exciting stuff. So with that, just as a reminder, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a BitCraft demo. So stick around in the game, definitely. We're going to be switching over to another stream that we have for the backend engine that we use to develop BitCraft, called SpaceTime DB. The entire game runs inside SpaceTime DB. Sounds like SpaceTime DB is not quite ready on the stream. We're going to need 5 minutes. But I'll just go through what we're going to do there.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people probably aren't super aware of like what SpaceTime DB is or why we built it and how does it relate to BitCraft. I think talking a little bit more about just like
absolutely
how BitCraft is possible, what will be possible in the future, why we decided to build SpaceTime DB instead of using something else would be awesome.
Of course.
To cover.
So yeah, so I mean, I think in order to understand that, you'd have to. We're going to be doing a demo, so let me just give you a sense of that. So we're going to do a demo where we're going to actually swap the logic of the game out while players are still playing the game. So we're going to actually change the back end of the game BitCraft without anyone noticing, which is kind of crazy. In this case, we're going to be fixing a bug that we introduced, and then we'll be removing it. And you guys can verify that. Literally, as we do it on stream, you can see it will change the behavior of the game. So that's super cool. Dactyl198 says, did you and Thor ever get together and have him test SpaceTime like he was thinking about? I haven't, but I would love to do that. We've both been, I think, very busy. Got to get back together. I sometimes, he's mentioned it, so we got to do that. I think he wants to talk about it with Primogen on stream. If you guys want to go over there and remind him about SpaceTime DB, we're getting there. I would love, if you want to pitch him this idea, I would love to do like a game jam, sort of a Thor run SpaceTime DB sponsored or something game jam on SpaceTime DB to see what people can make in a short amount of time with SpaceTime DB. I think it'd be super, super cool. So with that said, let me explain what is SpaceTime DB. So like I said, fundamentally SpaceTime DB is meant to make the developer experience for developing an MMORPG much, much better. So consider, for example, right now, if you want to make a single player game, you just basically need some game engine, maybe Game Maker, maybe Unity, whatever it is, and you need to know one programming language. And then you can kind of make whatever game that you want arbitrarily complex, as long as it's single player. As soon as you want to make a multiplayer, now the difficulty level goes up enormously. So you need to know about, if you want to deploy it yourself, you need to know about AWS, Docker and Kubernetes and networking and game servers and web servers and databases and all of this huge set of stuff. And that's a relatively simple game. If you want to make an MMORPG, it gets much more complicated, even still. What SpaceTime DB does is kind of turn that whole thing on its head. So instead of it being that you have to go set up all the infrastructure and you have to go develop all that stuff and all of the networking and all of the connection to players and so forth, you need, in SpaceTime DB, only to take the logic of your game and upload it into SpaceTime DB. So it sort of inverts it. Whereas before you'd have your game server connecting to all of these services and you build all that stuff. Instead, SpaceTime DB does all of that and you just write your logic. So the way you can think of it sort of as, if you're familiar, as sort of like a stored procedure, but made for much better user experience than what store procedures have been in the past. And so you can sort of take your whole application, you just publish it with one push. And we'll show this in the next thing. You'll see literally how we deploy BitCraft. It takes like 2 seconds. And I think with this, it's possible for individual developers to be able to make an MMORPG. I think that's totally achievable And because it's a database, you get all the persistence for free. So you don't have to think about, oh, I have to persist this, or when am I going to write that to the database, or is this in a transaction? It's all in a transaction. It's all persistent. You just don't have to care about that. And that's the kind of thing that means that instead of when you, for example, are Amazon Game Studios and you're making New World and you have to have 50 different microservices, one for the inventory system and one for the trading system and one for all this stuff, and then have 50 teams all talking with each other and coordinating on APIs. You just don't need any of that with SpaceTime DB, and I think it's really, really something powerful. And I'm excited for you guys to all see it. Let's see if I can answer some questions here in chat about that. My CS trigger words, Tyler. I still have nightmares. I'm sorry to hear about that. I still have nightmares as well. I'm trying to solve it so that we don't have nightmares anymore. Does SpaceTime DB play nicely with containers yet? I assume you mean Docker containers. It already does. You can use Docker. That should be possible already.
Yeah, I'd say the idea though is that unless you're hosting your own instance of SpaceTime DB, the whole idea is you get to forget about all that, right? The whole point of SpaceTime DB is like forget about Dockers, forget about your deployment and your hosting and all that. You literally just write your game logic, you upload it, and everything is handled.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. And to that point, in September, we're going to be launching SpaceTime DB 1.0, which is going to be the production-ready version of it. And that will also come with stable APIs and a new thing called mainnet. And in mainnet, that's basically the cloud service. You can sort of think of it as AWS, but it's just a giant machine, just a gigantic computer, and you just publish to it. And you say publish, and it runs forever. And you're done. You wash your hands of it, your game's running, as long as you pay for us to run your cloud service, of course. But then there's no DevOps required, and we sort of remove all of that from it. And I think the amount of games that you can make when you have a small set of people working on it, the creativity can be so much greater than a game where you have to coordinate 100 different people. And the vision of the game gets muddied and lost. And that's why I think you see that indie games are much riskier, much more creative, and sometimes much more fun than a AAA game that spent hundreds of millions of dollars. It's because they have a clear vision. Games are a work of art. And sometimes it's easier if there's only one artist to make something really cool. Oh, wow, not to mention another streamer, but SpaceTime DB just went live. Yes, it did, because we're about to hop over there, and I think we're going to raid them. Well, John's over there prepared. He's prepared this demo. We're going to be doing a demo live in BitCraft. Log into BitCraft. You can verify that this demo is going to work. It's going to be super cool. Literally cutting edge technology. No one else in the world can do this, to my knowledge, except for SpaceTime DB. It's a really, really difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, we're going to raid the stream. For people asking where to find that, we're going to raid the stream. And so if you like what you see on SpaceTime DB stream, you can give a follow there. They stream quite often. I believe the stream schedule is going to be back on a new kind of, there was a bit of a hiatus for a while, right, Tyler? And now it's going to be back on a more regular basis again.
That's correct. Yep. We were,
Cool.
preparing the next alpha. One thing I'll say, Dactyl198 said, haven't looked at the license. That seems quite restrictive, makes it very hard to choose if your game gets actually big. So the license for SpaceTime DB is a very standard license for databases these days. It's the MariaDB business source license, which basically says you can use it for wherever you want, not in production. You can also use it for in production, but you have to run a single node. You can't sell it as a service because it's an anti-AWS clause. Like, hey, AWS shouldn't be able to take SpaceTime DB and sell it as like Amazon SpaceTime DB. That's kind of the idea. And then ultimately, in 4 years, whatever it is, it becomes public, so you can do whatever you want with it. You can run it as a service. You can do whatever you want. Just gives us a little bit of a head start on AWS, essentially. Hopefully, we've designed that to be, eventually open source and source available always. So should be something exciting. So with that, I think we will probably head over to the SpaceTime DB stream. And thank you all for popping in. I'll be over there as well.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carter.